Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 239, Trail Running with the Rock Creek runner, Doug Hay.
In today's episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk to the Rock Creek runner, Doug Hay, about the ins and outs of trail running. But first, we start off by talking to Doug about his experience in raising his plant-based daughter, Eliza. The support he had from friends, family, and doctors is very different from what we experienced. We also get into what you need to know in becoming a trail runner, and if you're already an experienced runner, you'll surely pick up on some great tips and gems in this one. We cover everything from mindset, gear, distances, expectations, and tips you won't want to miss.
Doug is an ultra runner, coach, and lover of all things vegetables. He's the founder of Rock Creek Runner, host of the Trail Talk podcast, a trail and ultra running resource, and the co-host of No Meat Athlete Radio. Doug is fanatical about everything trail running, from beards to plaid shirts, bruised toenails, and all. You can find him on the beautiful trails in the Black Mountains of North Carolina, or at Rock Creek Runner on your favorite social media platform. So here's the thing. We all want to do a little bit better. We all want to make better choices, and we all want to have someone to count on to push us just a little bit outside of our comfort zone. But not everyone is willing to hire a coach or find a friend that could help us get us to where we want to go. That's what's great about our Propelled by Plants performance tees and our Training for Life soft cotton t-shirts. They are that reminder that is literally on your shoulder, encouraging you, reminding you, and building your confidence to run a little further, get up a little earlier, or make better choices at meal and snack time. Don't you want a little bit more of that? So head over to planttrainers.com/shop and pick up one or both of those shirts and start walking a little taller, or longer, or faster. Sizes go quick, so order yours today. And if you have one already, snap a pic and tag us on Instagram or Facebook. And now for a moment of gratitude.
I just got back from the Organic Garage, which is one of our local organic health food stores in the area. And I'm just very grateful that I have the opportunity to choose from a variety of organic foods, that I'm able to bring those foods home and cook them for my family, and just that I'm able to see friendly faces and other people who have the same interests as me walking around the store, shopping, browsing, and making changes in their families' lives.
Every weekend I take our kids to their swim sessions, and week after week I see how much they progress, and it's really amazing. So I'm just really grateful for the instructors that are doing such a great job with their kids and for the effort that they're putting in to learn how to swim.
Doug, hey, thank you so much for spending time on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is going to be fun. We've already been chatting a little bit, so that's been fun too, sharing some running stories, running into bears and what have you.
It never happened.
I swear it happened. Before we get into all this running stuff and everything else that we're going to talk about today, do you have a moment of gratitude that you'd like to share with us and the listeners?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So my daughter is taking her first steps, which it's been amazing for me to watch her kind of grow as she, grow from like this blob that did basically nothing to now somebody who can like make decisions on her own and now actually take steps and kind of go places that she wants to go, and thinking about her life ahead and her just being able to run around outside and join me out on the trail or whatever. I'm just incredibly grateful for that. So that's what I'm grateful for at the moment.
She's already going out on the trails. You're thinking of already taking her out trail running, huh?
That's right.
How old is she now?
She is 13 months.
13 months, and she's already running virtually. Wow.
No. But she loves to hike, in a pack, of course. But no, she's happiest when she's outside and really likes to explore nature for sure.
Well, there's no question that when she's ready to get out on the trails, it's going to be such a moment of joy for you. I remember when our son Russ did his first trail run. It was a 5K race, and I went with him, and it was just a beautiful experience for me, for sure.
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
For him too. He placed.
Yeah, it was awesome.
He was like the only kid in the race, and he placed. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah, okay. That's awesome.
So talking about your daughter, she's been plant-based from birth, correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, of course, she still does breast milk, but I think that counts as plant-based. But yeah, no, we're raising her vegan, and it's been, we're only 13 months in, and she's only been eating solids for 6 or 7 of those. But it's been super easy so far, and we've surprisingly, I was like really worried about pushback from doctors or just other parents and grandparents and things like that. And we have surprisingly seen very little of that. People have been really open to it and kind of expected us to go that way for obvious reasons. And there's been very, very little pushback from that.
I think that you're in a unique situation from a lot of other people out there because you've already established your plant-based lifestyle before she was born. So people already gave you the pushback and knew that you weren't going to budge. So they've already, they're already used to that in terms of you. But also, I think from when we transitioned our children, 7 years ago or 6 years ago, it's come a long way in 6 or 7 years. It doesn't seem like a lot of time, but boy, has there ever been people didn't know what plant-based was before. People barely knew what vegan meant before. And now doctors are like, well, I don't agree with it, but I know it's working for a lot of other people, so go ahead with it kind of thing. And it's much different today than it was when we transitioned our kids. First, we transitioned ourselves. So people are like, what? And then they're like, and you're bringing the kids with you? What are you talking about? So it was more of a shock. They went through that shock with our kids as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that, of course, like everybody, we got plenty of questions about diet and what it meant for us and what it meant for us as athletes and that kind of thing. But there's people, it's almost like people are expecting us to do it. And it's very possible they go home and talk to each other and they're like, oh, I can't believe they're doing that. But they're not doing it to our face, which is good. And our doctor, or her doctor, our daughter's doctor is really young. I'm not exactly sure how old he is, but I think he's less than 5 years out of med school kind of thing. So I think that has helped too, is that he didn't necessarily grow up in that. He's not 20 years into practicing medicine and kind of has those old ways of thinking ingrained in him. I hope that this younger doctor is kind of more open to that type of stuff.
Well, he's a millennial, so millennials are generally open to everything and anything.
That's right.
It's crazy. Your kid's doctor's a millennial. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's funny to. Yeah, he happened to be the pediatrician that was on call at the hospital, and so he was one of the first. He wasn't in the delivery room, of course, but he was one of the first people to kind of check her out, and he's great. It's been kind of, it's interesting to like have a really young doctor. You're like trusting, so much into this person, but he's been really great with the whole thing. So.
It's good. It's good to know that there are doctors out there. And if people aren't getting the support that they need from their doctors, then you can there's all kinds of ways to find a plant-based doctor in the area near you, or to be able to get support remotely if you need additional support as well, just to know that you're doing the right thing. Because I think as parents, we always second guess ourselves. Am I really doing the right thing? Or I know plant-based is good, but are they getting enough protein or iron or calcium or what have you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we need those questions answered, but there's definitely, just by listening to the podcast, you'll know exactly if you're on track or not for the most part.
Sure.
So when you became plant-based, what were some of the biggest benefits for you?
Mine was a slow transition. I went vegetarian, and I was vegetarian for 6 years or so before. And over that time, I just kind of gradually started cutting out things. My wife doesn't eat eggs, or never ate or hasn't eaten eggs in a really long time. So when we moved in together, we just kind of quit cooking eggs, or I quit cooking eggs, and dairy was just kind of an easier thing, or like milk, I guess I should say, was an easy thing to cut out because of all the plant-based milks out there. So we started doing like soy and almond milk and that kind of thing. And before we knew it, it was really basically just cheese, and then if we were going out to eat and butter was on things and that kind of stuff, that was like basically the only type of animal products that we were eating. So it naturally we began eliminating foods to a point where it wasn't that huge of a transition. It still felt big, because to officially kind of make that transition to plant-based or to vegan was, felt like a big step to take. But in reality, it really wasn't that big of a change for us. Because we were basically eating vegan at home anyway, for the most part. And mostly vegan outside as well. So what I did find though is that, of course, I, like a lot of people, I tend to eat a lot of food, and kind of like have very little self-control. And when you're eating a big salad, or when you're, just munching on carrots and hummus and stuff like that, you can still fill up, of course, but you don't get that like really heavy, bloated, like just stuffed feeling that you get if you're just chowing down on, like, I don't know, nachos with real cheese or something like that. So, that was kind of one big thing that I found, is that I was very, very rarely uncomfortably full, which I used to get that way all the time before. And then, of course, with athletics too, I just have all this energy. I think that it has helped a lot with my recovery. I like to think that way. Of course, I don't have any official data on myself to back that up, but I'm recovering. I'm rarely sore. I'm recovering well. I have just all kinds of energy, and it's been a really good thing for my running, but also just for the active lifestyle I like to live, to have that energy and to have that, to not feel weighted down or tired after every meal has been really good for me.
I hear you. And, it's hard because we don't usually have some real quantitative data on the changes that have occurred, especially when it comes to recovery. But I could remember Adam starting off in his first couple of, long races, and he would train and he would be like, shush, I'm so sore. Can you run me a bath? And I'd like run him a bath and put all the Epsom salts and like, can I have a massage? And like, it's like, when I think there's a Seinfeld episode like that, you're just kind of watching TV and then all of a sudden somehow your hands have been put on the shoulders and like somehow you're massaging and you don't know how you get there. He was complaining all the time and in Epsom salt baths all the time. And then when he switched, it was like, wait, I just bought like 2 big gallons of Epsom salt and it's been sitting here for 5 years doing absolutely nothing because he just didn't need it anymore. So yeah, sometimes if you think hard, you could find those subtle or less subtle changes, even though there's no data, there's no real proof. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. After my first, or while training for my very first marathon, I mean, I was sore for months. Like literally, after every long run, every Monday when I would go to work, I would just be wobbling to work and be completely uncomfortable. It would take me days to recover from every long run. And part of that was that, it was the first time I had ever run that far before, right? So every long run was basically a new distance PR for me. And that has obviously changed quite a bit. But I was just struggling so much. My body was struggling so much to recover week after week. And then by the time I ran my second marathon, I'd gone vegetarian and just everything was just so much easier and so much better. So, again, that's not necessarily the correlation, maybe not causation, but it certainly shows that it didn't hurt me at all, for sure. It seems to have definitely helped.
It's definitely helped. The recovery is unreal. And I know that even now, like I go for back to back long runs and I still feel fine. So
yeah.
The body really has adapted and adjusted, and the food that we fuel ourselves with is really significant. It makes a real big difference. And if I went back to eating maybe animal products or more processed foods, or I can't even imagine doing the animal products, but if I did, I know that my body would not react very well, and it would take me a lot longer to recover and feel as good as I do and still have the energy. I finish a 10-mile run and I'm like, okay, now what's next, right? That's changed completely for me. So have you always been an athlete?
No, I've always been active, and I've always loved to hike and camp and get outside. And, I played sports as a kid and that kind of thing. But for most of my life, I was a little bit overweight and never really did the whole gym thing. Was never too much of a runner until I graduated college. And then a roommate kind of challenged me to run a marathon. And I, had a couple beers and I thought it was a great idea. And so I signed up. And that was really kind of the catalyst to becoming a runner and becoming more of an athlete.
I want to know. Sorry to interrupt. I want to know what percentage of people sign up for their first marathon or half marathon while intoxicated.
Yeah. I'm sure it's high because that story and everyone's like, oh yeah, me too. I did the exact same thing, and it's one of those things that unless you're a runner that's like building up to and progressing, it just seems so out there that I would never have done it. But it was really exciting to me in the moment. And amazingly, it stuck. I woke up the next morning and I was like, okay, I better start training for this thing, and got really into the training. That was the first time I'd ever done any sort of long-term training plan like that, and I was super committed to each run and committed to making sure I hit those miles and those workouts, and quit drinking for much of that training cycle, and just got really into it. And after finishing, I was hungry for more, and immediately started training for my next one.
So I wanted to get that background on you being an athlete or not, because you got into running and you got heavily into running and are now working into the ultra distances and have been for a while. But I wanted to come back to something you said earlier about the food. And there's a lot of people that think that because I'm a runner, I could eat whatever I want and it doesn't matter. And I will lose it, I'll burn it. It's no big deal. I wanted to get your thoughts on that approach and that thought.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when I hear people say it. And I mean, it's something that I certainly fell victim to during that first marathon. I remember coming home from long runs and having like a frozen pizza all set out, and I would just put it in the oven and take a shower and get out of the shower and then devour like an entire, cheese and pepperoni pizza or something ridiculous that was completely unhealthy for me and was not helping with recovery at all. But that's kind of what people think, right? If you're running long distances, if you're running more, then you're hungry more and you can just eat whatever you want to. But I definitely don't think that's the case. And I think that's a reason why a lot of people end up getting surprised when they train for their first half marathon or marathon and they actually put on weight instead of lose it, because they are giving themselves this license to eat whatever they want to. But, it's what you eat that assists with recovery. It's what you eat that fuels each of those runs and fuels your body day in and day out. And if you're throwing junk in your body, then you're going to feel lethargic. You're going to produce junk miles, and it's certainly not going to help you as a runner. And, and like I said, a lot of people end up gaining weight there, and that's not a huge surprise when you really think about it. Even if you're burning a lot of calories, if you're just putting nothing but junk in your body, then it's just going to sit there. It's not going to convert to fuel like you want it to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it does hinder the recovery dramatically. And people don't realize it when they're doing their first training run or their first training for a marathon, I should say. But when they finish that experience and they go on to the next one, because for most people, they get addicted to it. They want to move on, maybe another marathon, maybe a different distance like an ultra. Mm-hmm. That's when they start to realize, oh, this food that I was putting in my body is not so good for me and it's not helping me. So the power of food's really important for people to understand. And as we've talked about many times, it could either hurt or heal us. And as a runner, as an athlete, as someone who wants to perform at their highest level all the time, no matter what they're doing, you want that food to be your fuel and you want it to help and heal you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I know what I do with a lot of my clients is I help them prepare in advance what they're going to be eating throughout the week, because I know I did very low intensity workouts for 2 years and a couple of months ago got back into high intensity. And when I was done, I was famished. Like by the time I came home and showered and got out of the shower, I wanted to eat everything and everything or anything and everything. But if you don't have a plan of what you're going to eat, then yeah, you're going to end up with that frozen pizza or sticking your hand in the cracker jar or the cookie jar or what have you. But if you have, your rice and lentils ready, or if you have soup ready, or if whatever it is that you have, what shake you're going to have, whatever it is, or smoothie, whatever it is that you're going to have, when you have that plan, you're not like making decisions when your mind is all like shaking and calorie depleted and everything like that. So having that plan and knowing what you're going to go for really helps you from eating the house, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great point and a really good idea, because for that exact reason, you come home from a run or a workout or whatever, and you want food immediately, and you're going to grab whatever it is that's quickest, and oftentimes that's junk food. So, I mean, one thing I do try to do most days most long run days is make a smoothie ahead of time, before I leave, and have it in the fridge just ready for me when I get home. Then I can just sip on that for a while I stretch or take a shower or whatever. And then, once I'm a little bit rested, I can then go ahead and make my bigger meal from there.
That sounds awesome. What's your favorite kind of running to do yourself when you're going out for those long runs?
Oh, I just, I love getting, not really lost, but not actually lost, but lost in the mountains, lost on the trail. I'm fortunate enough to live in the next to hundreds of miles of trails and mountains and great views and things like that. So if I have the time, if I just can do what I want to do. It's just to head out and not really have a distance or a pace or anything like that in mind, and just kind of go explore and just fall into the rhythm of the trail and see what happens. And I tend to carry an extra snack or a little bit extra water on days like that, just in case I feel good and want to keep going. And then I'm able to do that. And I could do that all day long, every day, just about, if I had the opportunity to do that.
So Doug, we heard you tell us that you've done marathons. What other distances and feats have you accomplished so far?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact number, but I've done about 24 ultramarathons at this point, and 300 milers. So those are kind of the big ones that I've accomplished so far. I have another one coming up in a couple months that I'm training for now. And
so you just said 3 100 milers, not a 300-mile race, right?
That's right. Yeah, three separate 100-mile races. Yep.
Yeah. No, I got that, but I figured other people might not have got that.
I'm calculating like 48 hours. I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah. There are some. I mean, there's a couple 200-mile races that I'm aware of, and I think the only 300-mile race I know of is that there's people who run the Iditarod, the dog sled race up in Alaska. There's people who run that, and there's a foot version of it, and you can go all the way to Nome, which is 1,000 miles, or I think that there's like a 350-mile version too. That's the longest race that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that someone else knows the longer one out there.
That's crazy.
So you've done a few 100 miles. You have another one coming up in April, right?
That's right. Yep.
And then have you done a 50-mile, 50K, anything like that?
Sure. Yeah. I started after running a couple marathons. Of road marathons. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and a friend introduced me to the likes of trail running in Rock Creek Park, where it's kind of the main trail system near or inside the city and around the city, and got kind of mixed up with this group of guys who were doing a bunch of trail running, and they introduced me to the world of ultras, and I signed up for my first 50K and thought it was just this crazy, wild thing that only 2 people in the history have probably ever done, and I thought it was super cool. And then I got there, and there's all these people, and there's like all this hype, and this this whole network of our community of people who are running these longer distances. So I was basically instantly hooked. I just absolutely loved the 50K distance and the trail running environment, and ran a few 50Ks, a few 50 milers. Every time I train for something longer, I try to do some of the shorter distance ultras, so 50K, 50 miles, something like that, as I build up to that. So I ran a trail marathon a couple weeks ago and have a 40 miler coming up on the 23rd, which will be my first really big race of the year.
That's a lot of running you must do. How many hours a week do you say you'd be running?
We're taking a pause to let you know this episode of the Plant Trainers podcast is sponsored by Health IQ. Health IQ uses science and data to secure low rates on life insurance for health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, triathletes, strength trainers, vegans, and more.
This is an amazing, innovative system. It offers lower rates to people as they take into account overall lifestyle and not just genetics. Because as we know from so many great episodes, we can control much of our genetics by the daily choices we make. Our environment speaks volumes.
Here's what we suggest. Go through your files and find out how much you're paying for life insurance right now. Then head over to Health IQ and just for fun and giggles, see how much your premium could be with Health IQ.
It'll ask you basic questions like your age, height, weight, and a bit about your health history too. But it also gives you the opportunity to tell them if you're vegan, what type of physical activities you take part in, and how often.
Then you get to take a fun quiz to make sure you're for real. It kind of gets your competitive juices flowing.
And if you do have a competitive side, then you'll for sure want to win by saving up to 33% in your life insurance by submitting actual data from your recent race results, or you could even take screenshots from apps like Strava or Runkeeper.
To see if you qualify, get your free quote today at healthiq.com/planttrainers or mention the promo code planttrainers when you talk to a Health IQ agent. And now back to the show.
Oh, it looks a lot different now than it did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
13 months ago.
13, yeah. About 14 months ago, I was running, about an hour and a half a day, and then a long run on the on the weekends. But now it's, now I'm getting out for probably about 4 hours during the week, and then another 3 to 4 hour long run on the weekend.
So it's interesting. A lot of people start off at like a short distance, like a 5K, let's say, and then they move to a 10, then they push themselves to the half marathon. But throughout that process, they always say, oh, that distance is crazy, the next one. There's no way I'm ever going to do a marathon. And then they do the marathon. And then they say, well, what's next? I did a marathon. I don't know, an ultra? That's kind of crazy. But I find that the more people I talk to and the more this ultra community starts to build, people are pushing themselves to go and do those ultras and get on the trails. Why do you think it's gaining so much traction? Why are people so attracted to that?
Yeah, I work with a lot of runners, and I'm asked very often, do I have to have run a marathon to run a 50K or a 50 miler? They want to, maybe they've run a half marathon, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they just kind of run casually now. And the idea of a busy city marathon, like a big city marathon, is not appealing at all. They want to go straight to an ultra distance trail race. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. I think part of it is just the allure of the trail race, and people like being outside, hikers and backpackers and things like that. People like that don't necessarily want to run a race with 10,000 other people on a crowded city street. They might much rather be out in the mountains. So I think that's part of it. And then the other part is, just like the marathon 10 years ago seemed like this crazy distance. I mean, I'm not downplaying the marathon. It is a very, very hard distance. And, if that's your ultimate goal, then that is fantastic. Even if it's not, that's still fine. But, 10 years ago, you hardly knew anybody who ran a marathon, right? And if you did, then they were like your marathon runner friend. And now it's kind of it's shifted to ultras. I think more and more people are doing it. There are more and more races all around, and people are hearing about it. And the marathon distance, it maybe isn't as exciting to them as something as crazy as 30 miles through the mountains, or 50 miles through the mountains, or 100 miles through the mountains. And I think that people are just kind of more excited about those types of outrageous goals. And the more outrageous they are, then they can kind of get more excited about them. So I think that that's part of it. But ultra running has just absolutely exploded over the past few years. And what I am excited about is that I'm seeing more and more shorter distance trail races as well, so that people who aren't ready for an ultra, or, maybe just really enjoy running fast, fast 10K or something like that, can also kind of get into the trail running community as well and get comfortable running fast and racing on the trails. And kind of that's like the end that maybe transitions them to an ultra, or maybe not. But I've at least locally here, there's been a ton of new shorter distance trail races that I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, definitely getting out there and experiencing the trail is amazing. I did my first ultra a couple of years now. It was a 50 miler, and I had never done a 50K. I basically went from the marathon to the 50 mile, and that's quite a jump. It's almost double, right?
Big time, yeah.
But during the training for the 50 mile, of course, I ran 50K, right?
Sure.
So during the training for some of these races, you're going to be running those shorter distances that you've never run, which are not actually short distances. But I found the experience to be incredible, and the community is obviously so much different when you're on the trail than when you're in that 10,000 person road race. So it definitely gives you a very different experience. And I kind of feel like people should have the opportunity to experience both, because it's pretty cool.
Right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either. I mean, I think, there's something really cool about, running a big marathon with all those people and all the crowd support, and, I don't know, running through the heart of DC or New York or Chicago or wherever, with all these people. I think that is really cool. But, at the same time, there's something also really awesome about running 50 miles on the trail, and, where you might not see anybody for a couple hours, you might be running by yourself for a lot of that time. It's a totally different style race, and they both can be really rewarding. You're talking about the differences between the community, or kind of how different it was when you ran that 50 miler. So, I remember during my first ultra of the 50K, there was a short out and back section, a couple miles from the finish. So you were basically done, but then they needed to make it a 50K, so they tacked on this little out and back section. And I was just blown away at how much support each runner was giving to each other. When you're passing the other person, it was just like everyone was high-fiving each other and congratulating each other. And there was like so little competition going on. I mean, there were obviously at that, I was well within the middle of the pack. And I'm sure that at the front of the pack, there was less of that. But, everyone was just, it's like we had all just gone through this thing together, even though we may or may not have actually run together. We were all kind of now affiliated with each other. I don't know. We were all kind of on each other's team, right? And that was a really cool experience that I had never, and I still have never since experienced in a road race.
So I would say that trail running could be an awesome experience for anybody, but I would probably put a warning to that, where if you went through high school, summer camp, university, sorority, what have you, and were always voted clumsiest person, trail running might not be the thing for you. But if people are saying, is trail running for me, who would you say it's for, really?
Well, I think that that's a great asterisk, but I would encourage anyone to at least give it a try. And the thing with trail running is that you're gonna fall. Everybody falls. You fall more when you're just starting out because you're not as good at picking up your feet or catching your balance and that kind of thing. But
your agility is not there yet.
Yeah, your agility is just not quite there. But even now, I mean, I have thousands of hours I would think hundreds or thousands of hours of time on the trail. And, I still take some pretty big wipeouts from time to time. And that's just part of it. But most of the time it's no big deal. And you just get up and keep on going. But, I think trail running is really for anyone who's just looking to do something a little bit different than road. I think for a lot of people, road running never really sticks because it's a little monotonous. Oftentimes you just kind of leave your house and do the same 3-mile loop, on the same streets, on the same sidewalks, day in and day out. And it can get a little monotonous and repetitive. And then, a couple months later, you're like, I don't really want to do this anymore. And you end up just skipping your run and skipping your workout and calling it a day. And, I think that trail running offers a bit of variety for people that, every time you go out on the trail, it's going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a different tree down. There's going to be, a change in the leaves. There's going to be, you're going to maybe see a bear or some sort of other wildlife. It's just going to be a slightly different experience every time you go out. And that's exciting. And that can be exhilarating to a point where, or motivating to a point where you actually go out and stick with it. But, I think that there is a little bit of this misconception that you're either a trail runner or you're a road runner, and you can't be both, right? And for most people, they might only trail run once a week, or maybe not even that much. They might only get out on a trail, every few weeks when they're able to get away from the city that they live in, or that they have time to drive to a trailhead. And you can still, you can still enjoy those runs on the trail, but even if you're spending most of your time, you're actually logging most of your miles on the road at home. So, I think that, I want people to understand that if it's of interest to you, just go out on a run a few miles, see how it feels, and if you like it, then next time you get an opportunity, go back and do some more trail running. But you don't have to be running trails all the time to be a quote trail runner or to train for a trail race or something like that.
So that leads right into what I was going to ask you, which was, let's say I had that trail run that you have in April coming up, and where I live, it's freezing cold outside and there's snow everywhere and there's ice all over the roads. How would somebody train for a 50-mile or 100-mile when they can't get out on the trails? What would they do? Yeah,
it's that's tough. It's a tough situation to be in. Maybe if you can't get out at all on the trails, then maybe you hold off and run a race in June instead. Mm-hmm. But I think you don't have to be on the trails all the time, right? So if you can run on the treadmill or run on the road, then that's a great way to just build up strength and endurance, and make sure your running legs are primed and ready to go. And then when you have the opportunity, maybe you're a couple weekends throughout your training, you can go out to somewhere else where you are able to run on the trails and do just a couple really big weekends of trail running then, and to get your trail legs and to make sure that you're primed and ready for whatever the course. So this is a particularly hilly course or mountainous course with a lot of elevation change. So for people who are not in the mountains or or have to be training at where it's flat, then if you can get out to the mountains just a couple times throughout your training and just have some really big weekends, some really big training sessions, then that'll help. And then, of course, there are other things like trail running requires a lot. Your stabilizer muscles need to be a lot stronger, so you can do things to help with your ankles and your feet and your knees, and do different exercises like that to just strengthen yourself and strengthen the muscles that might get taxed a little bit more on the trail than they would on the road.
So you'd be talking about some type of cross training?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can, or just strength exercises. If you're doing line hops or if you're doing different ankle strengthening exercises, there's a ton of different ways to strengthen the muscles that get taxed more on trail than on the road. And, and you can just kind of prepare yourself a little bit more that way. But definitely cross training for sure. If you can't get out and run, then get on the bike, get in the pool, do other things that you can do just to stay fit and to stay strong. So that when you do have the chance to get on the road or on the trail, then it's not as you're not trying to make up so much loss of fitness.
Right. Do you think that there's a difference between somebody's mindset when they're running a road race versus running the trails?
Running a trail race?
Yeah. Do you have to mentally prepare differently for a road race versus a trail race?
Yeah. It's different things are going to be thrown at you for sure. One thing about a trail race is that you never know really what the conditions are going to be like. If it rains the night before, if it rains during the race on a road race, you're going to have wet roads, but that's about it, right? If it's raining on a trail, then a trail could turn into a small creek, or it could, just get super muddy and you're having to deal with a lot of mud. Or, the race I have in a couple weeks, last year, there was a ton of snow up on the course, and people were having to deal with that. And, so you just never really know what you're gonna find when you're on a trail race or you're in a trail race. But so, kind of preparing for just about anything, accepting anything. And I think that if you're coming from a road background and you find yourself on a really muddy trail, it's easy to get like super negative about it and kind of
slip up,
feel unsure. Yeah. Slip up, just kind of not really know how to handle it. But if you just go in expecting the unexpected and expecting whatever gets thrown at you is just part of the race, and every other runner is running the exact same conditions that you are, then you can have fun with it, and you can kind of embrace all those challenges in a way that you maybe wouldn't if you were coming in with the road running mindset.
So a rookie mistake would be to expect road conditions on trail runs. Are there any other rookie mistakes that you could think of?
Oh, sure. One thing about a trail is, for the same reason, you never really know, unless you're super familiar with the trail, you never really know what the elevation profile is going to look like. You can look at the profile online, you can kind of read race reports and that kind of stuff, but until you get out on the trail, you don't know how steep those climbs are, or how rocky and technical the trail is going to be. And that goes back to just kind of expecting the unexpected, but embracing whatever the trail throws your way. But also, I would say, and other things, slow it down. Don't expect to hold the same pace that you would on the road, on the trail, because the trail is going to make you slower. And not worry so much about pace, and instead focus a little bit more on things like effort and the type of exertion your energy you're spending. I like to really focus on breath and that kind of thing as a gauge to how hard I'm working, much more than pace itself, because depending on how technical the trail is, I might be running what seems really slow as if you were to translate it to road running, but I'm working really hard because it's there's just a lot of rocks and roots, or a lot of climbs, a lot of just kind of really technical, unusual trail, and so that's slowing me way down, but I'm having to work and fight harder for that. So if I'm breathing really heavy, then I know I'm probably working too hard, and I might burn out on a longer run, a longer race. So, I like to kind of keep my breath steady, keep my effort level steady, regardless of what the conditions are like on the trail.
And what about gear? So if somebody's never run before, they can just go out in their regular running shoes, test it out a couple of times and see if they like it. And then where do they go from there?
Yeah. It's with gear, I like to say that there's no gear that's necessary for trail running. you can use any gear that you would use for road running. You can use any of that on the trail. So gear should never be something that keeps you from actually going out and trail running.
That'll just be an excuse. Of just be their own head keeping them from doing
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. I don't have trail shoes, or I don't have those packs that all the trail runners wear. I don't have this and that. And, none of that is necessary. I mean, you could, a lot of people run races like Western States, which is a very competitive, world-class 100-miler in California. A lot of people run that in road shoes because the trail is pretty smooth, and you don't need a really grippy, bulky trail shoe. But, that said, of course, if you're doing a lot of your running on trail running or on trail, if you're doing the majority of your running on trails, then I would certainly invest in trail running specific gear. So that starts with shoes. That starts with the shoes. The main differences are that a trail shoe has larger lugs, so larger kind of studs on the bottom of the shoe that will grip the trail a little bit better than a road shoe would, which is typically really flat. And then those shoes are also built a little tougher. They often have a more durable upper, so they can withstand hitting a bunch of rocks and sticks and things like that. A lot of trail shoes have a rock plate, which is basically just a really thin, bendable, protective plate in your outsole to help protect your foot against, rocks and things that stick up on the trail that might bruise your foot or something like that. So those are kind of the big differences between road shoes and trail shoes. And if you're doing a lot of trail running, I definitely recommend getting a pair of trail shoes. You're not going to regret it. Even now, because I do most of my running on trail, I even use my trail shoes most of the time if I'm doing a road run too, just because that's just the shoe I like. So you're not gonna regret getting a pair of trail shoes. That's the big piece of gear that I would invest in first. And then of course, as you're going longer, there's more things to consider. You might not have access to water fountains and things like that on the trail like you would on a road run. You might be further out in the middle of nowhere. So being able to carry water and nutrition and maybe your cell phone for emergencies or a map or things like that can be really helpful. So I, typically recommend that people who are running longer get some sort of pack or belt that they can carry gear and jackets and things like that in. Headlamps are good if you're running in the evening or early morning or maybe even through the night. Then you need a headlamp, since the road lights, there aren't any road lights on the trail. Street lights. So, things like that are good pieces of gear that you'll find a lot of trail runners have and are ones that will definitely assist you as you're spending more time on the trail. But, again, you should never let gear be the excuse for not getting out there and trying it.
Right. And now people are all amped up to go out for a run. And some of the listeners maybe have never been out for a run, or they are experienced and they need that little kick in the butt to go a little bit further. So what advice would you give to those just starting out or those looking to take the next step in going out to accomplish their goals?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to do is to start, right? I mean, that is the thing to do, is to not think about gear and not think about pace and all this stuff. I mean, you don't need heart rate monitors and GPS watches. You don't need fancy shoes. All you need to do is get out there and actually go run a mile. And if it starts by walking most of that and then just jogging a little bit, then great. If it starts by walking all of it, then that's great too. If you run a little bit on the road and you like the idea of going out on the trail, but you're just really intimidated by it, go for a hike. And then when it's flat and you feel comfortable, do a little bit of jogging, just kind of see what that feels like. Ease into any of that type of stuff. But of course, the big thing is you have to actually go out and start. You have to actually go out and do it. And there's so many reasons to make excuses. There's so many ways to hide behind fear and to hide behind, just excuses, right? So, but if you just go out there and do it, then most of the time you're going to realize that it's way easier than you thought. It's not nearly as intimidating as it maybe seemed like when you were planning it. And then you get excited, then you get motivated, and then then you're more likely to go out there and do it again.
I think that that's absolutely right. People will be motivated to go out and do it again. And if they want to reach out to you or see any things that you've written or get any coaching from you, where would you like them to go on the internet to find you?
Sure. So I have my own site, Rock Creek Runner, which is a trail and ultra running website where I like to share my own advice and then do some coaching and have some programs if you're looking to run your first ultra or something like that. That's rockcreekrunner.com, and then all the Rock Creek Runner social media handles as well. But I also work with No Meat Athlete. I co-host the No Meat Athlete radio podcast and do a lot of writing and product work for No Meat Athlete. So you can also find me there, and that's where I talk a lot more about diet and that kind of stuff, and how the plant-based lifestyle can really fit inside the endurance world.
Well, we'll definitely link to everything you just mentioned in our show notes at planttrainers.com. And before we let you go, I have to say that I want to wish you the best of luck on that 100-miler that you have coming up in April.
Hey, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure being on your show, and best of luck to you guys, and look forward to seeing everything you guys do.
Thanks again for all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast listening platforms. We appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it ensures other people will find us too. Thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference. Connect and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Plant Trainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at www.planttrainers.com for awesome plant-based recipes and a list of our services. Email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so we can answer them on our upcoming Facebook Lives. We hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time, and have a healthy day.